The sound of cruel laughter echoed through the Blackburn family's parlor as Grace Blackburn stood with her head bowed, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. It was 1878 in the small town of Willow Creek, Montana Territory. And at 26 years old, Grace had just endured the most humiliating family gathering of her life. 7 years married and not a single child to show for it. Her Aunt Martha's words cut through the room like a knife. I always said there was something wrong with that girl. Poor Thomas deserved better than a barren wife. Grace clutched her handkerchief tighter, the cotton fabric damp from her silent tears. Her husband Thomas had passed away 3 months ago from pneumonia, leaving her a widow with nothing but a small inheritance and a reputation that was now being torn to shreds by her own family. "It's God's judgment," her Uncle Robert added, swirling his whiskey in his glass. No woman should be unable to fulfill her natural duty. Grace's mother sat silently in the corner, not defending her daughter, but not joining in the cruelty either. Her father had passed 5 years prior, and without his protection, the family had slowly turned on her, especially after Thomas's death. "I should be going," Grace whispered, reaching for her shawl. "Thank you for the hospitality." Her cousin Beatrice, always the cruelest, laughed. "Where will you go, Grace? Back to that empty house? Thomas's family wants nothing to do with you either. They need heirs, not barren women." Grace straightened her spine, summoning what little dignity she had left. "I have made arrangements. I'll be leaving for Sweetwater in the morning." The room fell silent. Sweetwater was nearly 100 miles west, a frontier town known for its rough edges and even rougher inhabitants. "You'll be dead in a week," Aunt Martha scoffed. Grace didn't respond. She simply tied her bonnet and walked out of the house that had once been her childhood home. The door closed firmly behind her, and with it, she closed the chapter on her life in Willow Creek. The journey to Sweetwater was long and arduous. Grace had sold most of her possessions, keeping only what would fit in 2 trunks. The stagecoach bounced mercilessly over the rough terrain, and by the time they arrived in Sweetwater 3 days later, Grace was exhausted, dusty, and questioning her decision. Sweetwater was exactly what she'd heard, a bustling frontier town, with a main street lined with saloons, a general store, a small church, and various other establishments. Men outnumbered women significantly, and Grace could feel eyes following her as she stepped down from the stagecoach. "Madam, can I help you with those trunks?" the driver asked, already pulling them down. "Thank you. I need to get to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house." The driver nodded. "Just down the street, madam, the blue house with the white picket fence." Grace had arranged lodging through a friend of Thomas's who had connections in Sweetwater. Mrs. Henderson was reportedly a widow herself who ran a respectable establishment for women. The boarding house was neat and clean, if simple. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes, welcomed Grace warmly. "You must be Mrs. Blackburn. I've prepared the room at the back of the house. It's small, but gets lovely morning light." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, and please call me Grace." "Very well, Grace. You must be exhausted. There's water heating for a bath, and dinner will be at 6. The room was indeed small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small desk beneath a window that overlooked a garden. Grace sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to breathe. She was here. She had escaped. The next morning, Grace ventured out to explore the town and inquire about employment. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned that the general store was looking for help, and Grace made that her first stop. The bell above the door jingled as she entered Thornton's general store. A middle-aged man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning, madam. What can I help you with today?" "Good morning. I'm Grace Blackburn. Mrs. Henderson mentioned you might be looking for assistance in the store." Mr. Thornton studied her for a moment. "You're new in town?" "Yes, sir. I arrived yesterday from Willow Creek." "Not much between here and there." "What brings you to Sweetwater?" Grace hesitated. A fresh start. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he nodded slowly. "I could use help with inventory and serving customers. The pay isn't much, but it's honest work." "That's all I'm looking for, Mr. Thornton." "Can you start tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." As Grace turned to leave, the door opened and a tall man entered. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and the tanned face of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "Morning, Ethan," Mr. Thornton called out. "Your order came in yesterday." The man, Ethan, nodded, his eyes briefly meeting Grace's before she looked away. "Appreciate it, Thornton." His voice was deep but gentle. "Been waiting on those seeds for planting." Grace stepped aside to let him approach the counter, feeling suddenly self-conscious in her simple traveling dress. "This is Mrs. Blackburn," Mr. Thornton said, gesturing toward Grace. "She'll be working in the store starting tomorrow." Ethan turned to her, and Grace found herself looking into the warmest brown eyes she'd ever seen. "Ethan Tucker," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Sweetwater, Mrs. Blackburn." Grace hesitantly took his hand. "Thank you. Mr. Tucker?" His grip was firm but not crushing, his palm calloused from hard work. He smiled, and Grace noticed the crinkles around his eyes, suggesting he smiled often. "If you need anything, my ranch is just outside town, the Triple T." He released her hand and turned back to Mr. Thornton. "Got those nails I asked for, too?" Grace took the opportunity to slip out of the store, her heart inexplicably racing. She hadn't expected such a friendly welcome from a stranger, especially not one who looked like Ethan Tucker, with his broad shoulders and kind smile. Over the next few weeks, Grace settled into a routine. She worked at the general store 6 days a week, attended church on Sundays, and slowly began to feel like Sweetwater could be home. The townsfolk were generally welcoming, though Grace kept mostly to herself, still healing from the wounds her family had inflicted. Ethan Tucker came into the store once or twice a week for supplies. He was unfailingly polite, often asking how she was adjusting to Sweetwater. Grace learned that he ran the Triple T Ranch with his younger brother, Caleb, raising cattle and horses. One Tuesday afternoon, the store was quiet when Ethan entered, looking more serious than usual. "Afternoon, Mrs. Blackburn," he said, removing his hat. "Is Thornton around?" "He's gone to the bank, Mr. Tucker. Can I help you with something?" Ethan hesitated, then approached the counter. "I need some medical supplies. Got a situation at the ranch." Grace's concern must have shown on her face because he quickly added, "Nothing too serious. Found an abandoned child out by Miller's Creek. Looks about 3 years old. No sign of who she belongs to." "A child?" Grace's heart skipped a beat. "All alone?" Ethan nodded grimly. "Caleb's with her now. She's got some scrapes and bruises, probably hungry too. I need bandages, some salve, and maybe something soft for a child to eat." Grace moved quickly, gathering the items. "Has the sheriff been notified?" "He's riding out to search the area, see if there's any sign of her family." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Doesn't look good, though. There's been talk of a wagon train that got hit by sickness passing through last week." Grace added some hard candies to the bundle. "On the house," she said when Ethan raised an eyebrow. "For the little girl." "Thank you, Mrs. Blackburn." He paid for the rest and turned to leave, then paused. "Actually, I don't suppose you'd—" "Never mind." "What is it, Mr. Tucker?" "It's just, Caleb and I aren't exactly equipped to care for a little girl. If you could spare some time after work, maybe you could come out to the ranch, just to check on her." The request surprised her, but Grace found herself nodding. "I finish at 5. I can come then." Relief washed over his face. "I'll send the wagon for you." True to his word, at 5 o'clock a wagon pulled up outside the store, driven by a young man who looked like a younger version of Ethan. "Mrs. Blackburn," he called, hopping down. "I'm Caleb Tucker. Ethan sent me to bring you to the ranch." The Triple T Ranch was about 3 miles outside town. A modest but well-maintained property with a main house, a barn, and various outbuildings. Horses grazed in a corral, and cattle could be seen in the distance. Ethan was waiting on the porch when they arrived, his face breaking into a relieved smile when he saw Grace. "Thank you for coming," he said, helping her down from the wagon. "She's inside. Hasn't said a word since we found her, but she took some water and a little bread." The main house was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large fireplace in the main room and solid wooden furniture. In a rocking chair near the fire sat a tiny figure wrapped in what appeared to be Ethan's shirt. Grace approached slowly, kneeling down to be at eye level with the child. She was small, with matted blonde hair and huge blue eyes that watched Grace warily. "Hello there," Grace said softly. "My name is Grace. What's yours?" The child didn't respond, just clutched the shirt tighter around herself. "It's all right if you don't want to tell me yet. Are you hungry? I brought some candies." At the mention of candy, the girl's eyes widened slightly. Grace slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out one of the hard candies, offering it on an open palm. After a moment's hesitation, a small hand darted out and snatched the candy. Grace smiled. "There we go. Now, would it be all right if I looked at those scrapes on your arms?" Over the next hour, Grace gently cleaned and bandaged the child's injuries, speaking softly all the while. The girl never spoke, but gradually relaxed enough to accept more food and allow Grace to wash her face and hands. "She seems to trust you," Ethan said quietly as they stood, watching the now sleeping child curled up on his bed. "Children sense when someone means them no harm," Grace replied. "Has there been any word from the sheriff?" Ethan shook his head. "Nothing yet. If her family was with that wagon train—" He didn't finish the thought. "What will happen to her? The Hansons in town might take her in. They've been looking to adopt since their son died." Grace nodded, trying to ignore the twist in her heart. She'd always wanted children, had prayed for them throughout her marriage. To see this abandoned little one. "I should get back to town before it's too dark," she said finally. "I'll drive you," Ethan offered. The ride back was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the boarding house, Ethan helped her down from the wagon. "Thank you again, Mrs. Blackburn. You've been a great help." "Grace," she said suddenly. "You can call me Grace." He smiled, and even in the gathering dusk, she could see the warmth in his eyes. "Then you must call me Ethan." "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Grace. I'll let you know what happens with the little one." The next day, Ethan came into the store looking exhausted. "Any news?" Grace asked immediately. "Sheriff found what was left of a small camp. Looks like the child's parents died of fever. There was a Bible with the name Emma Moore written inside. We're assuming that's her." "Emma," Grace repeated softly. "It suits her. The Hansons have agreed to take her in temporarily, but—" He ran a hand through his hair. "She's been crying for hours. Won't let anyone near her except Caleb and me, and we don't know the first thing about comforting a little girl." Grace glanced at Mr. Thornton, who was watching their exchange with interest. "Go on," he said, surprising her. "The store's quiet today. You can make up the hours tomorrow." "Thank you," Grace said gratefully, already untying her apron. Emma was indeed in a state when they arrived at the ranch. Her little face was red and tear-streaked, and she was huddled in a corner of the main room, hiccuping with sobs. "Hey, Emma," Grace said softly, approaching slowly. "Do you remember me? I'm Grace." The child looked up, her sobs momentarily paused. "That's right. I brought you candy yesterday, remember? I came to see if you're feeling better today." To everyone's surprise, Emma scrambled to her feet and ran to Grace, wrapping her tiny arms around Grace's legs. Grace knelt and gathered the child into a proper hug, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "There now," she murmured, stroking the girl's hair. "Everything will be all right." Over Emma's head, she met Ethan's gaze. The look of relief and something deeper in his eyes made her heart stutter. For the next week, Grace spent every spare moment at the Triple T Ranch, helping with Emma. The child still didn't speak, but had begun to respond to her name, and seemed most comfortable with Grace and Ethan. The Hansons visited twice, but both times Emma hid and refused to come out. Mrs. Hanson, a kind woman in her 40s, eventually sighed. "Perhaps it's not meant to be," she told Grace. "She seems quite attached to you, Mrs. Blackburn." Grace had flushed. "I'm just helping until a proper home is found." But as the days passed, the idea of Emma going to another home became increasingly painful to contemplate. Grace found herself lingering at the ranch longer each day, helping with meals and even teaching Ethan how to brush a little girl's hair without causing tears. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Emma chase fireflies with Caleb, Ethan cleared his throat. "Sheriff says if no relatives come forward in the next few days, a decision will need to be made about Emma's permanent situation." Grace nodded, her chest tight. "The Hansons are good people." "They are," Ethan agreed. "But Emma doesn't want them." "Children adapt," Grace said, though the words tasted bitter. Ethan turned to look at her directly. "Why did you leave Willow Creek, Grace?" The question caught her off guard. "I told you, I needed a fresh start." "There's more to it than that." Grace stared out at the darkening land, wondering how much to reveal. Finally, she sighed. "I was married for 7 years. My husband, Thomas, died 3 months ago. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. But the truth is, our marriage wasn't what either of us hoped for. Ethan waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. We never had children, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. My family. They said it was my fault, that I was barren. After Thomas died, they made it clear I was a disappointment, a failure as a woman. She felt Ethan stiffen beside her. That's why you came here? To escape them? Grace nodded. I couldn't bear their pity and judgment anymore. They were wrong to treat you that way. Were they? Grace looked down at her hands. 7 years is a long time to try for a child and fail. Did it occur to anyone that perhaps Thomas was the one who couldn't father children? Grace looked up in surprise. Such a thing was rarely suggested in polite company. No. Women are always blamed for such things. Doesn't make it right, Ethan said firmly. My mother couldn't have more children after me. My father never blamed her, never made her feel less because of it. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. Your father sounds like a good man. He was. Taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by whether they can have children or not. He glanced at Emma, who was now being swung in circles by Caleb, her giggles floating through the evening air. Though I admit, I've always wanted a family. You'll have one someday, Grace said softly. Ethan's gaze returned to her face. I hope so. The moment was broken by Emma running up to the porch, her little face flushed with excitement. She held out her closed fist to Grace. What have you got there, Emma? Grace asked. Emma opened her hand to reveal a slightly squashed firefly, which immediately took flight. The child's face fell. Oh, it's all right, Grace soothed. Fireflies need to be free to shine, just like little girls need to be free to run and play. To everyone's astonishment, Emma spoke her first words since being found. Can I stay with you? Grace's heart nearly stopped. She glanced at Ethan, who looked equally stunned. Emma, I don't... Please? The child's blue eyes filled with tears. I be good. Grace gathered Emma into her arms, fighting back her own tears. Oh, sweetie, you are good. You're so good. She should stay with you, Ethan said suddenly. With us. Grace's head snapped up. What? Emma needs a mother who loves her, and you... He gestured helplessly. You already do, don't you? Of course I do, but I can't just... I'm a single woman living in a boarding house. The town would never allow it. Ethan stood, pacing the porch. What if you weren't living in the boarding house? What if you had a home, with land and security? Grace stared at him, Emma still in her arms. Ethan, what are you suggesting? He stopped pacing and knelt before her, his eyes serious. I'm not explaining this well. What I'm trying to say is, I've grown to care for you, Grace. These past weeks, seeing you with Emma, talking with you each evening, I know it hasn't been long, but sometimes you just know when something is right. Grace's pulse quickened. Ethan, let me finish. I'm not proposing marriage, not yet. That wouldn't be proper so soon. But what if you and Emma came to live here, in the house? We have plenty of room. You could have the main bedroom, and Emma could have the room next to it. Caleb and I can stay in the bunkhouse with the hands. People would talk. Let them. We'd know the truth that we're providing a home for a child who needs one, and giving ourselves time to see if there might be something more between us. Grace looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. The child felt so right in her arms, as if she belonged there. What if you find out I really can't have children? She whispered her deepest fear. Ethan's expression softened. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the touch gentle and comforting. Grace Blackburn, I don't know if you can or can't bear children. What I do know is that Emma already sees you as her mother, and He took a deep breath. I see a woman of strength and compassion who deserves better than the cruelty she's been shown. He took her free hand in his. Come stay at the Triple T. Let Emma have stability and love, and let us have time to know each other better. Grace looked into his earnest face, feeling something unfurl in her chest. Hope, fragile but persistent. Yes, she said finally. For Emma's sake, I'll come. The smile that broke across Ethan's face was like sunrise after a long night. For Emma's sake, he agreed, though his eyes said there was more to it than that. The move to the Triple T happened quickly. Mrs. Henderson was sorry to see Grace go, but understood the circumstances. Mr. Thornton agreed that Grace could continue working at the store, bringing Emma with her when necessary. The town gossips had a field day, of course. Some whispered that Grace had entrapped Ethan Tucker with a convenient orphan, while others speculated that Ethan was simply looking for a mother for the child he'd decided to keep. Grace did her best to ignore the talk, focusing instead on creating a home for Emma and establishing a comfortable routine. Ethan and Caleb moved to the bunkhouse as promised, though Ethan took his meals at the main house and spent his evenings with Grace and Emma. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the Montana territory, Grace found herself settling into life at the ranch with surprising ease. Emma was blossoming, talking more each day, and following Ethan around like a shadow whenever he was near the house. "She adores you," Grace commented one evening as they sat on the porch after Emma had been put to bed. Ethan smiled, the lantern light casting warm shadows across his face. "The feeling is mutual. She's quite a girl." "She is," Grace agreed, feeling the familiar warmth in her chest whenever she thought of Emma. "Grace?" Ethan began, then hesitated. "It's been nearly 2 months now." "Yes?" She knew what he was asking without him having to say it. Their arrangement had been meant as a temporary solution, a chance to see if there might be feelings worth pursuing between them. "I think," he cleared his throat, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The simple declaration hung in the night air between them. Grace's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. "I know it might be too soon," he continued when she didn't immediately respond. "And I understand if you need more time, especially after everything you've been through. But I wanted you to know." Grace looked at her hands, then up at the stars scattered across the vast Montana sky. "My family would say I'm foolish to believe I could find love again, especially with a man who knows my shortcomings." "Your family doesn't know what they're talking about," Ethan said, an edge to his voice. "And they certainly don't know me." Grace turned to him, finding courage in the earnest set of his jaw. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, Ethan Tucker." His smile was slow and sweet as he reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gentle kiss. "Then perhaps it's time we made this arrangement more permanent, for Emma's sake and our own." "Are you asking me to marry you, Mr. Tucker?" "I believe I am, Mrs. Blackburn, though I'd do it properly, with a ring and on one knee, if you'd give me a few days to prepare." Grace's laugh was soft in the night air. "I don't need grand gestures, Ethan, just honesty." "Then honestly, Grace, I want you to be my wife. I want us to raise Emma together, and whatever other children God might bless us with, whether they're born to us or come to us in need, like Emma did." Tears filled Grace's eyes at his words, at the acceptance and love they contained. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you, Ethan." The wedding was held in late October, a simple ceremony in Sweetwater's small church. Emma was their flower girl, scattering dried autumn leaves instead of petals, her blonde hair neatly braided and tied with a blue ribbon that matched her eyes. Mr. Thornton gave Grace away, and Caleb stood as Ethan's best man. The town turned out in force, curiosity overcoming disapproval for most. Even the Hansons attended, bringing a handmade quilt as a wedding present. As Grace and Ethan exchanged vows, she felt a sense of rightness, of coming home after a long journey. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Ethan's kiss was gentle but held a promise of deeper passion to come. The reception was held at the Triple T, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the trees. As the afternoon turned to evening, Grace found herself watching Ethan dancing with Emma, the child standing on his boots as he guided her in a slow circle. "They make a pretty picture," Caleb said, appearing beside her with a cup of punch. "You all do, actually." "Thank you, Caleb." Grace accepted the punch with a smile. "For everything, for welcoming us into your home." "Our home," he corrected. "Your family now, Grace. You and Emma both." As if hearing her name, Emma broke away from Ethan and ran to Grace, throwing her arms around Grace's waist. "Mama, Papa says we can have cake now." The simple words, "Mama," Papa, brought tears to Grace's eyes. She looked up to find Ethan watching them, his expression tender. Well, we can't keep Papa waiting, can we? Grace said, taking Emma's hand. Later, after the guests had departed and Emma was tucked into bed, Grace stood in the bedroom she would now share with Ethan, nervous despite herself. The dress she'd worn for the wedding had been simple but pretty, a pale blue that brought out the green in her eyes. Now she wore a white nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. The door opened and Ethan entered, stopping short when he saw her. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice husky. Grace blushed. "Thank you. It's been a while since I—" Ethan crossed the room and took her hands in his. "We have all the time in the world, Grace. There's no rush." She looked up into his warm brown eyes and found only love and patience there. "I want to be a good wife to you, Ethan." "You already are." He touched her cheek gently. "The best wife a man could ask for." When he kissed her, it was different from the chaste kiss in the church. This was a kiss of promise and passion, of a future they would build together. Grace found herself responding eagerly, her earlier nervousness melting away under the heat of his touch. That night, as they came together as husband and wife, Grace felt a healing begin deep inside her. A mending of the wounds inflicted by years of shame and rejection. In Ethan's arms, she wasn't barren or broken, she was simply Grace, and she was loved. Winter settled over Montana with a vengeance that year, bringing snow that piled high against the walls of the ranch house and temperatures that froze the creek solid. But inside the Triple T, warmth prevailed. Grace had transformed the house with small touches curtains she'd sewn herself, a patchwork quilt on the sofa, and always the smell of something delicious cooking in the kitchen. Emma thrived under their care, growing taller and more confident each day. She called them Mama and Papa without hesitation now, and if occasionally she woke crying from nightmares of being lost and alone, they were there to comfort her. In January, a blizzard kept them housebound for nearly a week. Ethan and Caleb managed to reach the barn to care for the animals, but otherwise, they were confined to the house. They passed the time with stories and games, teaching Emma to read simple words and watching her delight in each new accomplishment. One evening, with Emma asleep and Caleb reading by the fire, Ethan found Grace standing at the window, watching the snow swirl in the darkness. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Grace leaned back against him, savoring his solid warmth. "I was thinking how different this winter is from the last. A year ago, I was a grieving widow being told I was worthless because I couldn't give my husband children. Now, Ethan prompted, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Now I have a husband who loves me, a beautiful daughter, and a home filled with laughter." She turned in his arms to face him. "I never thought I could be this happy again." "You deserve every happiness, Grace." His hands stroked her back gently. "I thank God every day that you came into my life." Grace bit her lip, suddenly nervous. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." A flicker of concern crossed his face. "What is it?" "I've been feeling a bit strange lately, tired and sometimes sick in the mornings." His brow furrowed. "Are you ill? We should get the doctor out here as soon as the snow lets up." "No, I don't think I'm ill." She took a deep breath. I think I might be with child." Ethan went completely still, his eyes widening. "With child? You mean we're going to have a baby?" Grace nodded, her own eyes filling with tears. "I can't be certain yet. It's too early. And after all those years of trying with Thomas, I'm afraid to hope too much, but—" She didn't get to finish because Ethan had lifted her off her feet in a crushing embrace, his face buried in her neck. "A baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Grace." He placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "But even if it turns out you're not pregnant, or if you are, and something happens, it doesn't change anything between us. You're already the mother of my child, of our Emma." His words, so full of acceptance and love, broke something open inside Grace. The last remnants of her family's cruelty washed away in the face of Ethan's unconditional love. "I love you, Ethan Tucker," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "More than I ever thought possible." His kiss was tender and reverent. And I love you, Grace Tucker, now and always. By February, there was no doubt Grace was indeed expecting a child. The town doctor confirmed it during a rare visit to the ranch, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy, despite Grace's previous difficulties conceiving. Every woman is different, he told them, and sometimes, Mrs. Tucker, it's simply a matter of the right man. Ethan had grinned at that, proud and a little smug, while Grace blushed furiously. They decided to wait to tell Emma until Grace was further along, but their daughter was more observant than they gave her credit for. "Is there a baby in your tummy, Mama?" she asked one morning as Grace was braiding her hair. Grace's hands faltered. "What makes you ask that, sweetie?" "Mrs. Hanson told Mrs. Wilson at church that you're in the family way." "What does that mean?" Grace met Ethan's amused gaze across the room. "It means that, yes, there is a baby growing in my tummy. You're going to be a big sister." Emma's face lit up with excitement. "A baby brother or sister? When? Can I help take care of it?" "The baby will come in the summer, and yes, you can absolutely help take care of your little brother or sister." Emma threw her arms around Grace's neck. "I'm going to be the best big sister ever." "I know you will be, sweetheart." As spring began to thaw the frozen landscape, Grace's body changed, her stomach rounding with new life. Ethan was attentive and protective, sometimes to the point of fussing, which made Grace both exasperated and deeply touched. "I can still collect eggs." "Ethan," she protested one morning when he tried to take the basket from her. "The doctor said you should rest." "The doctor said I should avoid heavy lifting and exhaustion. Gathering eggs is neither of those things." Ethan reluctantly handed the basket back. "At least let me come with you." Grace laughed. "To protect me from the ferocious hens?" "Very well, Mr. Tucker, if it will ease your mind." They walked to the hen house together, the spring sunshine warm on their faces. The ranch was coming alive after the long winter new calves in the fields, green shoots pushing through the soil in Grace's vegetable garden, and wildflowers beginning to dot the prairie. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as Grace collected the eggs, "we should expand the house before the baby comes. Add another bedroom at least." Grace straightened, one hand on her lower back. "That sounds like a good idea. Emma will want her own room as she gets older, and if we're blessed with more children, I was thinking the same." Ethan's smile was warm as he took the now full basket. "I want to build something that will last, Grace, a home for our family for generations to come." "I'd like that too." As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Grace thought about how far she'd come from that painful day in her family's parlor. She hadn't heard from any of them since leaving Willow Creek, though she'd sent a brief letter after marrying Ethan, more out of duty than desire for reconciliation. "You're quiet," Ethan observed, squeezing her hand. "Everything all right?" Grace nodded, pushing away thoughts of the past. "Just thinking about how fortunate I am." Ethan stopped, turning to face her. With his free hand, he touched her cheek, then her rounded belly. "I'm the fortunate one, Grace Tucker. You and Emma and this little one. You're my whole world." In early July, as the summer heat settled over the Montana plains, Grace went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Ethan paced outside the bedroom door, occasionally hearing Grace's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. Emma had been sent to stay with Mrs. Henderson in town, away from the worry and tension. Caleb stayed with Ethan, offering silent support as the hours dragged on. "She'll be all right," Caleb said as dawn broke. "Grace is strong." Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the fear clogging his throat. He'd lost his parents, had nearly lost Caleb to pneumonia the same winter that had taken Grace's first husband. The thought of losing Grace was unbearable. Finally, just as the sun was fully risen, a new sound pierced the morning quiet, the lusty cry of a newborn. Ethan froze, his heart pounding, until the midwife opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Tucker. You have a son, and your wife is asking for you." Ethan's legs nearly gave out with relief. He stumbled into the bedroom to find Grace propped up against the pillows, her face pale and exhausted but radiant with joy. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "come meet your son. He approached the bed on shaking legs, sitting carefully beside her. When she pulled back the blanket, he saw a tiny face, red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair. "He's perfect," Ethan breathed, reaching out to touch one miniature hand. The baby's fingers curled reflexively around his, and Ethan felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "I thought we might name him James, after your father," Grace said. "James Thomas Tucker." Ethan looked up, touched beyond words that she would honor both his father and her first husband in their son's name. "It's perfect. He's perfect. You're perfect." He leaned forward and kissed her gently. "I love you so much, Grace." "I love you too." She smiled tiredly. "Despite what they all said, it seems I'm not barren after all." Ethan shook his head, cupping her cheek in his hand. "You were never barren, Grace. You've always had so much love to give, first to Emma, now to James, and always to me." Grace's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at their son. "I never thought I'd have a husband who truly loves me, children to hold in my arms." "You deserve it all and more," Ethan said firmly. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again." Emma was brought home that evening, her excitement at meeting her baby brother infectious. She climbed carefully onto the bed beside Grace, peering at James with wide, wondering eyes. "He's so tiny, Mama." "You were this tiny once too," Grace told her, smoothing Emma's hair. "Was I in your tummy too?" Grace and Ethan exchanged a look. They'd explained to Emma that she had come to them differently than the new baby, but at 5 years old, her understanding was still limited. "No, sweetheart," Grace said gently. "You grew in another mama's tummy, but you grew in my heart, and in Papa's heart too." Emma considered this, her small face serious. "So I have two mamas? One who grew me in her tummy, and you who grew me in your heart." "That's right," Ethan said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "And both mamas loved you very much." This seemed to satisfy Emma. "Can I hold him?" With careful instruction, Emma was positioned with pillows supporting her arms, and James was placed in her lap. The look of awe on her face as she gazed down at her brother made Grace's heart swell with love. "I'll take care of you, Jamie," Emma whispered to the baby. "I'm your big sister." Ethan's arm slipped around Grace's shoulders, and she leaned into him, overwhelmed by the perfection of the moment, her family, complete and whole, bound together by love rather than blood. The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joy-filled days as they adjusted to life with a newborn. James was a good baby, generally content except when hungry, and he grew quickly, his features becoming more defined with each passing week. By August, Grace was well enough to accompany Ethan into town, bringing both children with them. It was their first trip as a complete family, and Grace couldn't help feeling a flutter of pride as she carried James in her arms, with Emma skipping alongside Ethan. The townspeople greeted them warmly, most coming over to admire the baby and congratulate them. Grace was touched by the community's acceptance, so different from the judgment she'd experienced in Willow Creek. They were just leaving the general store when Grace stopped short, her heart skipping a beat. Walking toward them was a woman she recognized immediately, her cousin Beatrice, the one who had been cruelest at that last family gathering. "Grace?" Beatrice looked equally shocked. "Is that really you?" Ethan's hand came to rest protectively at the small of Grace's back. "You know this lady, Grace?" "My cousin," Grace said quietly. "Beatrice, what are you doing in Sweetwater?" Beatrice looked uncomfortable. "My husband has business interest in the area. We're just passing through." Her eyes flicked to Emma, then to the baby in Grace's arms, and finally to Ethan. "I see you've remarried." "Yes, this is my husband, Ethan Tucker. Ethan, this is my cousin, Beatrice Walsh." Ethan nodded coolly, clearly picking up on Grace's tension. "Madam, and these are our children," Grace continued, a sudden fierce pride overtaking her nervousness. "Our daughter Emma and our son James." Beatrice's eyebrows shot up. "Children? But I thought you couldn't—" "It seems the problem wasn't with Grace," Ethan interrupted, his voice level but with an edge of steel. "My wife is an excellent mother to both our children." Beatrice had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yes, well, congratulations, I should be going. My husband is waiting." As she turned to leave, Grace found her voice. "Beatrice, wait. Please tell my mother. Tell her I'm happy, that I found a good man who sees my worth, and that she has grandchildren, if she ever wishes to know them." Beatrice hesitated, then nodded. "I'll tell her." She paused. "You look well, Grace. Better than I've ever seen you, actually." After she'd gone, Ethan pulled Grace close, mindful of the baby between them. "Are you all right?" Grace took a deep breath, surprised to find that she was. Seeing Beatrice had stirred old hurts, but they no longer had the power to wound her deeply. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." "You were amazing," Ethan said, pride evident in his voice. "My brave wife." Emma tugged at Grace's skirt. "Mama, who was that lady?" Grace smiled down at her daughter. "Just someone from my past, sweetie. Nothing to worry about." As they walked to the wagon, Grace felt lighter somehow, as if the last chains binding her to her painful past had finally broken free. She had faced her demons and found them diminished, rendered powerless by the love that surrounded her now. That evening, after the children were in bed, Grace sat on the porch with Ethan, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Penny for your thoughts," Ethan said, echoing his words from that winter night when she told him she was pregnant. Grace smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking about the day we met, in the general store, when you needed supplies for Emma." "Best day of my life," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Though I didn't know it at the time." "Nor did I." Grace laced her fingers with his. "I was so broken then, Ethan. So convinced that I was less of a woman because I couldn't have children. And now?" Grace thought of Emma's laughter as she chased fireflies in the yard, of James's sweet baby smell, and the weight of him in her arms. She thought of Ethan's unwavering love and support, of the life they were building together. "Now I know that motherhood isn't just about bearing children. It's about loving them, nurturing them, putting their needs before your own." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "You're a natural at it, Grace. From the moment you met Emma, I knew you were meant to be her mother." "You knew before I did," Grace said softly. "I remember what you said to me that first day at the ranch, when I told you my family had shamed me for being infertile. What did I say? You said that it didn't matter to you whether I could bear children or not, that Emma already saw me as her mother." Grace turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "You gave me back my sense of worth, Ethan. You helped me see that I wasn't defined by my ability to conceive." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his expression tender. "You never needed me to show you your worth, Grace. It was always there. I just refused to let you believe otherwise." He kissed her then, a kiss full of love and promise. When they parted, Grace rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Ethan Tucker. And I love you, Grace Tucker, today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come." As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly of the future of the house extension Ethan had begun building, of Emma starting school in the fall, of James's first smile just that morning. Grace thought of how far she had come from that day in Willow Creek when her family's cruel words had driven her to flee. She had found not just a new home, but a new life, one filled with the love and family she had always longed for. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry carried on the night breeze. But Grace wasn't lonely anymore. She was home, surrounded by love, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for the man beside her, the cowboy who had looked at a woman shamed as infertile and seen not what she lacked, but all that she could be. "She'll be mother to mine," he had said of Emma, but in the end, he had given Grace so much more than motherhood. He had given her acceptance, respect, and love without conditions or expectations. And in return, Grace had given him her heart, completely and without reservation. Together, they had created a family bound not just by blood, but by choice and love, the strongest bonds of all. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast Montana sky, Grace knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. This man, these children, this life, they were her destiny, her happiness, her forever. And for a woman once told she would never know the joy of motherhood, it was more than enough. It was everything. 5 years later, the Triple T Ranch had grown considerably. Ethan and Caleb had expanded their cattle operation, added more horses, and built a larger main house to accommodate their growing family. Grace now had 3 children to mother Emma, 10 years old and as bright as the morning sun. James, 5, and the spitting image of his father, and little Sarah, just turning 3, named after Ethan's mother. The town of Sweetwater had grown as well, with a proper school now, instead of just the one-room schoolhouse, and even a small library that Grace helped establish. She still worked at the general store 2 days a week, more because she enjoyed it than from necessity, as the ranch prospered under Ethan and Caleb's careful management. On a warm September afternoon, as Grace hung laundry in the yard with Sarah helping by handing her clothespins, a wagon came up the drive. Grace shaded her eyes against the sun, recognizing the Hendersons' buggy. "Mrs. Henderson," she called as the older woman drew near. What a lovely surprise. Mrs. Henderson climbed down carefully, a letter in her hand. "Hello, Grace. I hope I'm not intruding, but this came for you at the boarding house. The postmark is from Willow Creek, so I thought it might be important." Grace's heart skipped a beat as she took the envelope. "Thank you for bringing it all this way." "Not at all. I was coming out to see the Johnsons anyway." Mrs. Henderson smiled at Sarah, who was hiding shyly behind Grace's skirts. "My, how she's grown. The perfect image of you, Grace." After Mrs. Henderson had gone, Grace sat on the porch steps, the unopened letter in her hands. Sarah played with her doll nearby, chattering happily to herself. It had been years since Grace had received any communication from Willow Creek. After Beatrice's chance encounter with her in town 5 years ago, Grace's mother had sent a stiff, formal letter acknowledging James's birth, but making no mention of Emma or any desire to visit her grandchildren. Grace had responded politely, but received nothing further. Taking a deep breath, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. "Dear Grace, I hope this letter finds you and your family well. I write with sad news your Aunt Martha passed away last month from influenza. In her final days, she spoke of you often and expressed regret for her unkindness. I too find myself filled with regret as I grow older. The words spoken that day after Thomas's funeral were cruel and unfounded. I should have defended you, my only daughter, instead of allowing such treatment. Beatrice tells me you have 3 children now, and a good husband who values you as you deserve. I am glad, though I take no credit for the woman you have become. If you can find it in your heart, I would very much like to meet my grandchildren before I am too old to travel. I understand if this is not possible or welcome. With love and remorse, your mother Grace read the letter twice, then carefully refolded it, her emotions a tangle of hurt, forgiveness, and uncertainty. Mama?" Sarah's small voice broke into her thoughts. "Why are you sad?" Grace smiled at her youngest, so perceptive for her age. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking about my mama, your grandmother." "Where is she?" "Far away, in a place called Willow Creek." Sarah climbed into Grace's lap, her little hands patting Grace's cheeks. "Does she love us?" The innocent question brought tears to Grace's eyes. "I think she would, very much, if she knew you." That evening, after the children were in bed, Grace showed Ethan the letter. He read it silently, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking?" Grace asked when he looked up. "I'm thinking it should be entirely your decision whether to respond or not." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What do you want to do, Grace?" She sighed, leaning against him. "I don't know. Part of me wants to crumple this letter and forget it ever came, but another part wants closure," Ethan finished for her. "Or maybe reconciliation." "Yes." She looked up at him, grateful as always for his understanding. "They hurt me deeply, Ethan, the things they said, but she's my mother, and she's aging, apparently." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think? I think the Grace I married is compassionate enough to forgive, even when forgiveness hasn't been earned." "Is that wisdom or manipulation, Mr. Tucker?" Grace asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite the seriousness of the conversation. "Just an observation, Mrs. Tucker." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. And if you want to invite your mother here, our home is big enough." Grace thought about it for several days, turning the matter over in her mind as she went about her duties on the ranch. She watched her children Emma reading to her siblings, James trying to rope fence posts like his father, and Sarah trailing after them all, and thought about how her mother didn't know them at all. Finally, she sat down and penned a reply. Dear Mother, thank you for your letter. I was sorry to hear about Aunt Martha's passing. I have indeed been blessed with 3 beautiful children and a husband who has shown me what true partnership and respect look like. Emma is 10 now and was our first child, though not born to me. We found her orphaned when she was 3, and she has been our daughter in every way that matters since. James is 5, a sturdy boy with his father's eyes and love for the land. Sarah is 3, sweet-natured and curious about everything. It has taken me time to heal from the wounds of that day after Thomas's funeral. I came to Sweetwater broken in spirit, convinced that I was less of a woman because I couldn't give Thomas children. Here, I found not just a second chance at love, but also the discovery that the problem had never been with me at all. More importantly, I found a man who didn't measure my worth by whether I could bear children, though I have been blessed to do so twice now. Ethan loved me and saw me as a mother to his family before we even knew if I could conceive. I tell you this not to cause pain, but to help you understand the journey I've been on. I have learned that family is created by love, not just by blood. My children have taught me that forgiveness is possible, even when the hurt runs deep. If you truly wish to know your grandchildren, you are welcome to visit us at the Triple T Ranch in Sweetwater. The journey is long, but we have plenty of room, and you could stay as long as you like. Your daughter, Grace. 2 months later, on a crisp November day, another wagon came up the drive of the Triple T. Grace had been watching for it, had been prepared for this moment for weeks, yet still felt a flutter of anxiety as she saw her mother for the first time in nearly 6 years. Elizabeth Blackburn had aged considerably, her once dark hair now completely gray, her face lined with years and, perhaps, regret. She descended from the wagon slowly, her eyes fixed on Grace, who stood on the porch with Sarah in her arms. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Elizabeth took a hesitant step forward. Grace, you look wonderful. Grace swallowed past the lump in her throat. Hello, Mother. Welcome to our home. Sarah, never shy for long, piped up. Are you my grandma? A tremulous smile broke across Elizabeth's face. Yes, little one. I'm your grandmother. I'm Sarah. I'm 3. She held up 3 fingers proudly. Do you want to see my kitty? The simple question, so innocent and accepting, broke the tension. Grace set Sarah down, and the little girl immediately took Elizabeth's hand, tugging her toward the house. Come on, Grandma. Mama made apple pie, and Papa will be home soon with Emma and James. Elizabeth looked back at Grace, her eyes asking a silent question. Was this acceptance real? Grace nodded slightly and followed them into the house. The reunion with Ethan and the older children went better than Grace had dared hope. Emma was politely curious. James was won over when Elizabeth produced a small wooden horse she'd brought as a gift, and Ethan was unfailingly courteous, if reserved. That night, after the children were asleep, Grace found her mother sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. May I join you? Grace asked. Elizabeth nodded, and Grace sat beside her on the bench, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been earlier. Your children are beautiful, Grace, Elizabeth said finally. And this place, it suits you. I've never seen you look so content. I am happy here, Grace agreed. It's become home in every sense of the word. Your husband seems like a good man. The best, Grace said simply. He saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. I should have done that. I was your mother. I should have defended you, supported you. Yes, you should have, Grace said quietly. But we can't change the past, Mother. We can only decide what to do with the present. Is it too late for us? Elizabeth asked, her voice trembling. Have I lost you completely? Grace thought about the long road she'd traveled since leaving Willow Creek, the pain, the healing, the joy she'd found. She thought about the lessons she wanted to teach her own children about forgiveness and second chances. It's not too late, she said finally. But it will take time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. Elizabeth nodded, wiping away tears. Time is what I'm asking for. A chance to know you again, to know your children. To try to be the mother I should have been before. Grace reached out and took her mother's hand, feeling the bones beneath the papery skin, aware of the years that had been lost, but also of the possibility that lay ahead. "Stay through Christmas," she offered. "Get to know your grandchildren. Let them know you. We'll start there." Elizabeth's smile was watery, but real. "Thank you, Grace, for your generosity of spirit. Your father would be proud of the woman you've become." Later, when Grace slipped into bed beside Ethan, he pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Everything all right?" he murmured. "I think it will be," Grace said, settling against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It's strange, having her here, but also healing somehow. You're doing a brave thing, Grace. I'm doing what you taught me, seeing beyond the hurt to the possibility of something better." Ethan's arms tightened around her. "I didn't teach you that. It was always in you." Grace thought about the long journey from that painful day in Willow Creek to this moment, from a woman shamed and rejected to one surrounded by love and family. Ethan had been right all those years ago. She had always been capable of motherhood, of creating a family bound by love rather than just blood. As she drifted towards sleep, Grace offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the second chances she'd been given with Ethan, with Emma, with her own ability to bear children, and now, perhaps, with her mother. Life had a way of coming full circle, of healing old wounds when one was brave enough to keep moving forward. Outside, the wind whistled around the eaves of the house they had built together, but inside, all was warm and secure. Grace Tucker, once told she would never know the joy of motherhood, fell asleep in her husband's arms, her heart full with the knowledge that her 3 children slept safely down the hall, and that tomorrow would bring another day of the life she'd once only dreamed of having. It was more than enough. It was everything.